Welcome to Horticulture and Homes. Okay, today I think we'll make some onion relish. I have a 50-pound bag of sweet onions that my husband picked up by mistake. So they're not going to be real long keepers, so I'm going to have to work some of these onions up. So some things I'll dry, and then I'm going to make this Vidalia onion relish today. And my recipe that I'm using today came from the University of Georgia, and I will try and place the link so that you can find that recipe. But we need to start with 1.5 gallons of ground sweet onions, and to that we need to add a 1/2 cup of salt and let that set for 30 minutes. Alright, I ground my onions in the food processor, and the easiest way for me to measure that was to use a gallon jar and a 1/2 gallon jar. And then I'll just dump these out. That'll take a little bit of work to get those back out. These will come out a little bit quicker. And any juice that was there, I poured that off because we're going to be discarding that. So I'll just dump these out into this bowl, and I'll mix it with my 1/2 cup of salt, and I'll be right back. Okay, I've got my jars heating up so that they're being sterilized in hot water, and it's been 30 minutes since I placed the salt in with the onion, and that was canning salt I used because we don't want this mixture to be cloudy. So anything that isn't iodized would work fine. And you can see just how much liquid is accumulated. It's quite a bit there. So we need to separate the onion from the juice that has exuded. And I'm just going to use a colander. Pack that in here good. And I'm just going to squeeze that out. Quite a bit of liquid coming out. Still, a little bit of liquid still coming out. I'm going to just let that drain for a few more minutes. And while I'm waiting on that, I'm going to add a teaspoon of turmeric, 4.5 cups of sugar, and I like to use my canning jars to measure some of my things out, because there are some of my canning jars actually have measurements on it. They come in really handy when you need to measure out large quantities. So that's a teaspoon of turmeric, 4.5 cups of sugar, a quart, which is 4 cups of cider vinegar, and it calls for 4 teaspoons of chopped pimento. And I have this small jar, and I'm just going to dump the whole thing in. And then I need, I'm going to wipe my hand off here. Boy, that's on there tight. Okay, this is my pickling spice, and I have it vacuum sealed. It's on there really tight, so I'm going to go ahead and get my onion ready, put it in, and then I'll come back and put my pickling spice in. Okay, I wanted you to see just how dry my onion is. I have a little bit more to put in here. And I actually wound up having to use my hands to squeeze the moisture out because I just wasn't able to press hard enough in my colander. There was still a fair bit of moisture in there. So I used my hands. And I have this little bit that needs to go back in my stock pot. So I'm just going to dump that in. And since we're using vinegar and salt, you want to make sure you're using non-metallic or stainless steel if you use metal. I also wanted to show you just how much liquid from that salting the onion down. I have nearly a half gallon of liquid, and before I salted my onion, it actually sat on my counter for 30 minutes or so before I had it ready to salt down, and I poured some moisture off then too, so there was probably another cup, at least a cup and a half of moisture that came off earlier, plus this nearly half gallon. So that's quite a bit of moisture. I got my jar of pickling spices open, and you just need to place those down into a muslin bag or some cheesecloth and tie that. But I have this stainless steel mesh, and I need 4 teaspoons. And my pickling spice, I buy that from an Amish grocery store. And I'm going to make sure that stays closed. I'm going to pop this down into my liquid. And I'm going to let this cook. I have to let it cook for about 30 minutes until the mixture starts to thicken and the sugar melts. So I'll do that. The relish is done cooking. I just wanted to show you what it looks like. Nice and yellow. That turmeric gave it such a beautiful color. And I have a hot jar here. My ladle that's been sterilized, and all my tools here. Just get those out. I'm just going to ladle this into the hot jar. We just need about a ½ inch of head space. There's a little bit much in there, so I'll pull some out. Now I'm going to put my relish into the jars, and then I'll top it off with the remaining liquid. So I don't want to put my lids and rings on just yet. So while I'll finish this up, and I'll come back and get ready to put the lids on. Alright, I'm just working on the last jar, and I'm going to take my plastic spatula and run that around the edge of my jar, make sure that there aren't any air bubbles left. And I did this with each of my jars. I'm going to wipe that rim so it's nice and clean. Oh, it's hot. I'm going to put my ring on my lid and then get my ring. And I'm going to place these down into my canner. And I'm going to do a water bath with this. And once my canner comes up to a nice rolling boil, I'll let these go for 10 minutes of processing time. I now have my jars into my canner, and I'm using the base of my pressure canner, and then I'm going to use just a glass lid on top. And I've made sure that my jars are not sitting on the bottom, that I do have my rack in here. And as long as this doesn't boil away too terribly bad, and the jars don't touch the edge of the pot, that's all fine. Otherwise you would want to use a canning rack. The other thing I wanted to mention was that when you're doing a hot water processing, you want to make sure that your water in your canner is below 180 degrees, or not above 180 degrees, because you need enough time for the temperatures to come up for the mixtures in the jars to process for the proper amount of time. So if you had hotter water in here, that would come to a boil much quicker, and your processing time would actually be reduced. So make sure that we did a hot pack, and so we did need to put this into hot water, but I made sure that this water was below 180 degrees. Now I'm going to let this come to a rolling boil. Okay, you can see now that we're at a full rolling boil, and I'm just going to let that go for the 10 minutes. I'll see you in a few minutes. I've just pulled the relish out of the water bath canner, and 3 of the lids have already sealed in that short amount of time. I just wanted to show you again how pretty this onion relish is. It's sweet and salty and onion, but the onion is the mild onion, so this would be good with any type of poached meat. I think it would be good with pork or chicken or fish. And then I also wanted to let you know that I did not use Vidalia onions. I used a Texas sweet onion, and this is very, very good. The other thing, I was getting ready to dump this this salt water, that briny liquid, and I thought, that would be really good if I were going to brine chicken or turkey or something like that. That would be great to use in a recipe like that. I would just adjust my my salt, if I need additional salt, to whatever I already had in this, and the amount of liquid that I have and the amount of salt, and that would be really tasty, I think, added to a brine. So, use everything that you have. I just wanted to show you the finished product of the Vidalia onion relish, which I made with the Texas sweet onion. It really looks nice. Very easy to make. Something you might want to make and keep in your pantry.